Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to see everybody. We have a wonderful book review tonight. And before we do that, I just want to tell you that our next book review will be July 13th, and the title is Not Our Kind, and it's a novel by Kitty Zeldis. Nima Jackson will be giving the review. And the other thing I wanted to say is we have already chosen the books for the next 2022 to 23. And I'm gonna put a list out for the bulletin so that if people want to read any of the books over the summer, they'll have it in front of them and enjoy all the wonderful books that we've chosen. So it's going to be called Read and Review with Sisterhood. So if you see that article, you'll see all the books that we've chosen for next year. And with that, I would like to introduce Shelly Cyprus, who I'm so happy is here and will be doing this book review. She always does such a wonderful job, and I'm sure you'll all love it. Shelly, it's yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. And thank you, Diane, for giving me the privilege of reviewing this book. After many, many hours of interviews, I feel I understand Stefania's motto, which is that all people are God's children under the skin, and that love breeds love and hate breeds hate. So it is a privilege to tell her story. It is worth noting that we are once again watching the megalomaniacal aspirations of a madman destroy the lives of Jewish men, women, and children in Ukraine. And how ironic that now Jewish refugees are seeking shelter and support in Poland. The light in hidden places takes us to another time, when Poland was the killing field, as part of Hitler's plan to eliminate the Jewish gene pool from all of Europe. It is the story of a teenager, Stefania Podgorska. The first slide, please. An innocent, religious Catholic farm girl. Here she is at her first communion. From a small village in Poland, Lipa, who along with her devoted and daring younger sister, second slide, Helena, and without a formal education, important social contacts, or financial resources, outsmarts the German SS and the Gestapo, and with courage, conviction, and cunning, saves the lives of 13 Jews destined for death in the gas chambers. The third slide. Next. Next, thank you. Of the more than 3.3 million Jews who lived in Poland at the start of the Second World War, only 130,000 survived. 560 Polish citizens were either publicly shot or hung for attempting to hide their Jewish neighbors. Their names are, for the most part, lost to us. On the other hand, the names of Stefania and Helena Podgorska has been enshrined at Yad Vashem, at the National Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. They have been portrayed in a movie, Hidden in Silence. There is also a documentary and numerous interviews, including a famous moment on the Oprah Winfrey Show when Stefania points her fingers and says, "Wait a minute, wait a minute." That went viral because miraculously,
you got mail.
They and those in their care survived. We know their names. In 1993 was the 50th anniversary of the Holocaust. Sharon Cameron watched one of the many interviews with Stefania. She was in awe of the courage and conviction of that teenage girl, and she never forgot the story.
Yeah, you're there.
At that time, she was a classical pianist and had no idea that writing would become her second career. Fast forward 25 years, now she is the New York Times bestselling author of 5 novels aimed at a young adult audience and published by Scholastic Press. The story that came and found her 25 years before was ready to be written. So she reached out to Stefania's son, Ed. He had already established the Steffi Foundation to memorialize the work of his parents and to keep their legacy alive. He answered the telephone when she called, and they became fast friends. He introduced her to his 97-year-old mother, who was suffering from dementia and had been for many years. They traveled to Poland to see the actual places where the story took place, as well as Auschwitz and Belzec concentration camps. Many of the photos you will see today were taken during that trip. Most importantly, she was given access to the 350-page unpublished memoirs of his mother. And this book is based on the true story contained in those pages. It was written in the first person, as was the memoir. We see the story only from Stefania's point of view. And because of that, we can feel the weight of her decisions. It was published by Scholastic Press in 2020, again aimed at a young adult audience, but is considered a crossover novel that can be enjoyed by adults of any age. Now, you're going to ask me, I know, what is young adult fiction? It's aimed for kids from 9th to 12th grade. There is an economy of words. They're tense, taut, motion-laden. The rhythm is clipped and sparse. It's heavy on dialogue with a modicum of description. And sexual encounters are intimated, insinuated, suggested. That doesn't connote a lack of candor, but we are supposed to use our imaginations, which will differ with age and experience. And I'm going to read you a very short passage, which will, I think, explain this. And just listen to the way the words are put together. The building had been Jewish, and now it was as empty as a freshly dug grave. And I was by myself in a corner of it. I saw shadows move. Imagine shiny boots coming softly down the hall. And there was no one to talk to, no one to tell. I wanted my mother. I wanted Mrs. Diamant. I wanted Izio. I clutched my blanket to my chest, sweating. I did not like to be afraid. I think that gives you a good sense of what that means. With this background in mind, let us begin. Stefania Pogorska was born June 2nd, 1921, as one of 9 children. What we know about her youth is that she hated the farm, especially the cackling of hens and the crowing of the roosters. The Catholic faith played an important part in her life. She attended Mass many times each week. There are many examples of her fingering her rosary beads and always a portrait of Mary with baby Jesus hanging over her bed. But she was a big city girl. So how could you keep her down on the farm after she's seen Przemysl? That's right. Przemysl is pronounced Przemysl. Slide number 4, please. Przemysl is located in the southeastern corner of Poland, closest to the Ukrainian border. Slide number 5. It is a small town located between Krakow and Iwu. I was able, slide number 6, please. I was able to locate a photo of the old synagogue that was firebombed and completely destroyed early in the conflict. I was so happy to have that picture. Well, after much cajoling and many tantrums, her mother allowed her to live with her 2 older sisters in Przemysl. She worked for the Diamant family in their small grocery store and cafeteria, beginning in 1936 at the age of 12. The Diamants were fully integrated into Polish society. About 1/3 of the population of Przemysl was Jewish. They were mainly merchants, jewelers, teachers, artisans, and of course, doctors and lawyers. Stefania became part of the family. Leah Diamant became her babcia, her grandma. Mrs. Diamant, who spoke Yiddish at home, called her Ketzela, my little kitten. There were 4 Diamant sons. Chaim was a physician, Max, a dental student, Ishu, or Isidore, he was in school, college, and Henrik was the youngest. The Diamants also had a daughter, Ernestina. She plays no part in the novel, although in real life, she perished trying to rescue Ishu from the slave labor camp. Instead, Cameron gave Stefania that gruesome task, at which of course she failed when her train was inexplicably delayed 4 hours. The German guard's description of Ishu's last tortured moments are almost too difficult to read. That part of the story is true, as is the sweet romance that blossomed between Stefania and Ishu for a brief time. Since Stefania didn't attend school, she told her mother that the city would provide her education. Through various parts of the story, Stefania talks about what she learns. For example, early on, she sees a street fight between 2 young boys because one had called the other one a dirty Jew. And she heard a woman in the crowd muttering, "Dirty Jew, dirty Jew." I want to read you about that moment in time. I think it's very interesting. The building had been Jewish. No, I'm sorry. Let me get to the right page. Here we are. I got a good bargain on plums from Mrs. Diamant. And when I ran back to the shop, I slipped through the door to the toilet and stood there, looking in the mirror. I touched my face, the skin of my arm, and my brown hair. People hated that boy because he was a Jew. Could the Diamants hate me because I was a Catholic? But suddenly I knew that Mrs. Diamant had been lonely before I came to the shop and that she wasn't lonely anymore. That I had been lonely on the farm, surrounded by brothers and sisters with lives of their own, a mother with too many cares, and a pen full of chickens. And I wasn't lonely anymore. That Sunday at Mass, I thanked God for the Diamants. Moses was in my Bible too, after all, and I felt certain that God had liked him. My education had begun. Stefania actually moves into the Diamant apartment when her sisters leave town to get jobs in different cities. In September 1939, bombs begin to fall. When the smoke clears, the Russians and Germans occupy opposite sides of the city, which is divided by the Shin River. Since the Diamants are on the Russian side, life goes on pretty much as before. until June 1941, when the Germans, at the height of the military power, occupy the whole city. At this point, Hitler's final solution is put into operation. The city's Jewish population had swelled to about 22,000 people, but statistics don't tell the story. We feel the tragedy through Fusha's eyes. Fusha was a nickname, everyone called her Fusha. The Diamants enter the hastily established ghetto, leaving most of their possessions and their apartment in Fusha's care. Temples and synagogues were destroyed. All commercial and residential real estate was expropriated. Leah and Itzhak Diamant disappear in the first deportation from the ghetto, called an action. And so enter Max Diamant, without whom there would be no story. The next slide, please. Here is Max. He's standing in the door of the small grocery store. The next slide. Here he is, a close-up. I love this one. Doesn't he have the sweetest smile? He was born in 1915. Knowing that he is facing certain death in the second action, he jumps from a moving train, taking him to Belzec. He is pushed out of the window, feet first, and saved from death, if you can believe this, by a loaf of bread hidden in his shirt, which cushions his fall. He walks, beaten and bloodied, back to Przemysl, to the only home he knows, and knocks on Stefania's door. Slide 9. I thought this was a great picture with him and his mustache. And slide 10. This is interesting. This is his identity card, and you can see the word Jude on top. The next slide is an actual slide of people from the ghetto in the train station waiting for the train to take them to Auschwitz. And the next slide is the actual track that Max jumped from the train from. You can see that the train was turning, and so it had to slow down. And so he had the opportunity. By this point, Stefania has retrieved her sister Helena, who was at this point 6 years old, from the clutches of a drunken farmer and neighbor, Mr. Zielinski. She was left in his care by her mother, who along with her brother was conscripted to work in a labor camp in Salzburg. Mr. Zielinski physically abused Helena. She was suffering from malnutrition and dehydration. And that's when Stefania decided her only course of action was to return with her to Przemysl. But before she left, she had these few choice words for the farmer. God is going to pay you back, I said. He looked a little startled. For every time you hit her, I'm going to pray that a German soldier comes and beats you 10 times with a club. And for every day you made her go hungry, I'm going to pray that you go 10 days with nothing to eat, and especially with nothing to drink. I'm going to pray that you break out in boils, that you're bitten by a rabid dog, that your teeth turn black and your parts fall off. I glanced down, and so did he. And that the nasty vodka you brew in that barn of yours rots you slowly from the inside out. Mr. Zielinski opened his mouth and closed it again. And between the two of us, Mr. Zielinski, I think you know whose prayers God is going to answer, you miserable schmuck. That's our Stefania. So when Max arrives, Stefania and Helena agree that Max could stay until he was healed. Later on, she said, he asked to stay one night, and he stayed 59 years. In a very moving passage, Max gives Stefania and Helena the choice to save him and a few others from certain death. I'm going to read that to you now. Max shakes his head. When you watch little children being murdered while you hide in a hole in the ground, too afraid to come out, you know that you are nothing. When whole countries want you dead, when thousands cheer for speeches about your destruction, when the dogs of the guards are treated better than you are, then it's not a question, Stefania. You know you are nothing. I know what I am asking. It isn't fear, and you have Helena to think of. I will understand if you say no. Next question, next slide, please. This was a matter of life and death. Every day, you walk out on the street and see people hung for trying to steal their Jewish neighbors away from death. As more stragglers arrive, the number grows to 10 adults and 3 children, too many for the Diamant apartment. Eventually, they are secreted away in the attic of a cottage on a quiet street, 3 Tartaska Street, without electricity, running water, or indoor plumbing. Tatarska 3, slides 14, please. This is the front of the house. This is actually Tatarska 3. 3 windows at the top, 1 boarded up at the bottom. The next slide. Here is the yard with the water pump. As I said, no running water. The next slide. This is inside the attic. Actually, 2 people could sit comfortably there, and you can see with a slanting roof that it really wasn't possible to stand. The next slide. This is Stefania visiting that same attic in later years. Her custodian, which is actually the landlord, Mrs. Kajewski, lives next door. The walls between the houses are too thin. Every sneeze, every cough, every creaking board can give them away. The noise problem was solved in many different and often amusing ways. 1, a farmer's wife is selling out her entire lot of, guess what? Chickens. Thankfully, only hens. Helena invents an imaginary cat that is now a pet. And the real life scurrying of rats add both drama and disease for the attic dwellers. Rats would run across their bodies night and day. They couldn't kill them, move, or make a sound. What follows in the book is a series of vignettes of increasing intensity, close calls, unwanted, amorous suitors whose uninvited visits could expose them all, miraculous escapes, clever bargaining in the market, life-saving revelations. One night, Stefania has a dream. She sees Isio, and she looks up, and sees the ceiling of the Diamant apartment, and suddenly she remembers that Mrs. Diamant had hidden jewels and other things away in those eaves. And what she finds is a stash of furs, fur collars, fur cuffs, a fur vest, which she can sell. And one of the most important finds, a wagon full of old boards and timber, which Max uses to build a false wall across part of the attic, behind which the group can hide when visitors become curious. He also digs a hidey hole into the basement under the bed. 2 feet of dirt is put on the floor next to the stairs that go up to the attic, where the chickens dig around, of course. And I have yet to talk about the contribution of Helena to their survival. So what did Helena do at the age of 6, 7, and 8? It was her job to empty the chamber pots twice a day, bring water from the well, help cook and clean. She was a very convincing liar, never divulged the hiding place to friend or foe. She was beaten many times. Pass letters through the barbed wire of the ghetto under the nose of the Gestapo. I think this is the best story. At one of those clandestine encounters, she is caught by the Nazi guard. He beats her, and she bites him hard on the leg. Surprised and in pain, he releases her. She runs. He runs after her. While running, she swallows the incriminating note that had their address on Tatarska Street, number 3. She swallows it, and she tells Stefania afterwards, "It was very hard to swallow, but when he caught up with me and shook me, it went down very easily." She gets loose again, and she knows the back alleys and the back doors, and so she gets away. And how many people do you think bit a Nazi and lived to tell the tale? Isn't that a great story? Starvation is the worst problem, and it is never fully solved. With the help of a friend, Stefania uses false documents that show her to be of working age. Of course, she was not. And she also saves enough money in various ways, has a bribe. So she gives the guy a bribe and then waits. And finally, she gets a job in a tool factory making screws for the Germans. She operates at the age of 17, 6 delicate machines that make 30,000 screws every shift. The machines are hot, fast, and dangerous. Losing a finger or a hand is considered to be not uncommon. Of course, it pays the bills, as they say, but it is exhausting work. And when you think that things can't get worse, they do. Mrs. Krajewski's first husband, sister's son is in the SS, and he moves in next door. And he stays until the end of the war. Then, if that wasn't bad enough, the empty building across the street is turned into a hospital. The next slide, please. Now, this is an exact picture of the street. To the left is Tatarska 3. To the right is the hospital. And of course, down the street is the church. Stefania is given 2 hours to vacate, or she will be shot. Max tells her to leave and save herself and Helena. She refuses. And the good news is that only 1 bedroom is needed to house 2 nurses. Unfortunately, they spend the rest of the war entertaining their Nazi boyfriends just below the attic. Slide 19. This is a wonderful, wonderful drawing that Max did. When Helena and when Helena and Stefania decide that they are not going to leave them, even at the pain of death, Max draws this wonderful drawing of Stefania as an angel guarding the 10 adults, and Helena as an angel guarding the 3 children. So there are Nazis below, there are rats above. What else could go wrong? The tool factory is being shipped back to Berlin along with its employees. There are long passages as Stefania feigns illness, but she can't get the medical card necessary to stay in Przemysl. No doctor is willing to give it to her. Finally, the nurses drag her across the street to the hospital, where she undergoes a frightening experimental medical procedure that involves injecting a poisonous substance deep into her womb. And then the doctors insist that she has to continue these treatments back in Berlin. So whether she goes back as an employee of the tool factory or as a patient of these treacherous physicians, she needs to leave, and she can't. But it's nearing the end of the war, and the last trains are leaving Przemysl. So at the last moment, after some clever shenanigans, Helena and Stefania stay behind closed doors until the last train departs. The Red Army retakes Przemysl on July 27, 1944. Slide 20. This is Stefania and Helena at the end of the war. 21. This is a few years later. Helena remained with Stefania. She did not go back to her family after the war. Helena remained with Stefania until she went off to college, and eventually she became a physician. She remained in Poland. She didn't emigrate, but just apparently a lovely woman. At one point, Sharon Cameron had the opportunity to interview her, and she said she was sweet as soul as you could ever meet. And you can tell that. Just look at that sweet face. The next slide. Okay, this is Stefania and her husband in 1993. The next one. And this is Stefania in the last year of her life with her 2 children, Ed and Christina. The next slide. Tatarska 3 has been turned into a museum. They've redone the building. There's a plaque on the wall honoring Stefania and Helena. And the next slide, slide 25. A memorial has been built in Przemysl, where the ghetto once stood. So who were the 13? And what happened to them? Well, we know Max Diamant. Max Diamant changed his name to Joseph Berzminski after the war. Anti-Semitism was rampant in Poland after the war. The Poles wanted to finish what the Germans couldn't. And so if you had a Jewish name, you couldn't get a job, you couldn't go to school. It was difficult to work. So Max Diamant became Joseph Brzezinski for the rest of his life. He was called Joe. He converted to Roman Catholicism and married Stefania Fusha. As you know, they had 2 children, Ed and Christina. He died after a very happy marriage, 59 years of marriage. He died in 2003. Henrik Diamant also changed his name to Henrik Zawadzki. He married his girlfriend Danuta, who was his fiancée in the attic. He became a dentist and moved to Belgium. They have 1 daughter and 7 grandchildren. Dr. Wilhelm Schillinger was Max's employer, and his wife was murdered in the Holocaust, but he remarried. He remained in Poland, and he became an oral surgeon. Zusha Schillinger, his daughter, married and settled in Belgium. She has a son and daughter and 4 grandchildren. Malvina Zimmerman is called Besserman in the book. She was a piece of work, wasn't she? Malvina was the one who had Helena give a letter to Stefana to say that if she didn't let them come in, she knew that they were there. If she didn't let them come and hide, she was going to tell the Germans, and then they would all be killed. And so they did. There were 3 of them: Malvina Zimmerman, Sesha Zimmerman, Yonik Zimmerman, her son, eventually all settled in the United States. Sesha has a son and daughter and 4 grandchildren, and Yonik 2 sons and 1 grandson. And then there was Dr. Leon Hirsch. Poor Dr. Hirsch, he couldn't keep his mouth closed. It was because of Dr. Hirsch that others heard about the attic and came to be rescued. And he kept on saying throughout the book, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Anyway, he and his son, Sionik, both settled in Russia. His cousins also came, Monik and Salah Hirsch. They were the cousins of Dr. Hirsch, and they settled in Israel, as did Yannick Dorlich, who was Stefania's mail carrier. He was the last person to enter the attic, and he also settled in Israel. So by my count, that is 24 Jewish people of the next generation who scattered all over the world and were saved by Stefania and Helena Pogorsky. But I've decided to end this report not with those who were saved, but with a more problematic question. Let's take Emilika. Emilika was the 23-year-old Polish friend and neighbor. She lived downstairs in the Diamants apartment building. Her help was crucial during pivotal moments in Stefania's journey. She helped her get forged work permits. She helped her discourage the attentions of uninvited male suitors by allowing her to use a photo of an SS officer and prominently display it in the kitchen when they called. Made them very nervous, so they didn't come back. Stefania feels that she can confide in her and hints about the possibility, perhaps hiding some Jews. And this is Emilika's response. "What are you talking about?" she says slowly. "You stupid, stupid little girl. Do you want me to die? Do you think you've lived long enough? Well, I haven't. I plan to be around years from now, and I won't throw my life away for some Jew I've never even heard of. You might as well ask me to jump out your window, and you can jump out of it too. It might be quicker, them being shot. What you're suggesting is a 1 in a million chance. And that means there are 999,000 other chances to die. But Stefania answers, it's not zero. What? Not 0 in a million. It could work. It's suicide. And what about Helena? These people, Fusha, it's awful. It's sad. But you didn't make these things happen, and it's not something you can fix. They're not your responsibility. Helena is your responsibility. If you won't think of yourself, think of her. Not her responsibility and not mine. Whose responsibility is it then, Emelika? So I'd like us to think about that question of whose responsibility it is. And now I'm more than willing to take questions, and perhaps you have other moments in that novel that you would like to discuss. Is there anyone on the chat?
I just want to say one thing. Is that okay, Shelley?
Oh, I'm hoping, yes.
Well, when Biden went to Poland, I saw on the map, that name of that town was on the map. And
Yeah,
it was very,
Przemysl.
Yeah.
Przemysl now, Hadassah has
oh,
doctors going to Przemysl because it's the closest major city to Ukraine.
I
And
got so
so-
excited because I said, oh, it's in the book.
Yes, and so Przemysl has become an important place right now because of its convenient location to the Ukraine. And many people are now stationed there and helping Jewish refugees. They're helping them in Przemysl, which I think is very interesting, isn't it? That they're doing that. Anyone else have a comment?
Where did they settle? Where did the Stefania, I don't remember if you said, where did they settle?
Stefania
husband.
and Joe Berzminski settled in many places. They lived in Israel for a few years. She wasn't happy there. They moved to Brookline in Massachusetts. He worked as a dentist there. He had to go back to dental school at the age of 40, knowing very little of the language. And he passed and got his license and practiced dentistry for the rest of his life. And finally, they settled in Southern California where their son Ed was living. So they ended up in Southern California, which they enjoyed their life very much there, very much a part of a growing Jewish community there. They are and remain Roman Catholic, including Joe Berzminski, for their lives. So he was very proud of his Jewish heritage.
So what was the deal with converting to Catholicism? I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
what I was surprised when you said they had converted to Catholicism.
Yes, it was a surprise to me as well.
And
She
what
would
did
not
they-
marry him unless he converted. Stefania would not marry him unless he converted to
Oh
Catholicism.
my goodness.
And he said, she sacrificed her life to me, and then I gave her mine. And so he ends up converting to Catholicism, and I couldn't find this out. I tried, I looked. I couldn't find out if their children were also Roman Catholic.
That was my next question.
I have
Yeah.
tried to find out, Google that information, tried to find out, were they Catholic? But I couldn't find out. But yes, he converted to Catholicism when they married.
Well, it did say in the book that her mother and her family had disowned her for what they had done. for the
Yes.
Jews.
Yes, she was disowned by her family, never spoke to them again. To any of her 9 siblings, they never reconciled. They never wanted to speak with her. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Even after all the celebrity, and there were many children still alive, no one ever contacted her. She never saw her mother again. And her father had died, but she never saw her mother again once they married. And so her life was a life with him. She built a good life with him. And she had two adoring children who really have kept up and memorialized their parents and trying to keep their ideas alive. Yeah.
Shelly, I wanted to say that, I don't know about others, but I had never read a book from a righteous Jew the way this was written. I mean, we all know how horrible it was, but you never really thought before, and I've recommended this to 100 people, about how you have to go from market to pick up food. I mean, her story, the last 100 pages, I was up to 2
I mean,
in the morning.
it is beyond belief, except it's true.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
miraculous, except it's true. I mean, if Hashem answers prayer, this is a story of prayer's answer.
Right. Yeah.
Because truly, the things she had to go through. I love the story. I mean, you could tell stories all night. You could,
Yeah.
The point is not just the stories, but I love the one where they were starving. She didn't have a dime. So she gets old sweaters from the market, which people just hand her because there are holes in them. No one wants to wear them.
Unbelievable.
So she tears the sweaters apart. She has all this yarn, which Danuta manages to dye in beet juice. So it's all red yarn. They dry the yarn. And then she teaches the people in the attic to knit. And some of them knit better than others, but they all knit sweaters of this new purple, red dyed yarn. They knit sweaters and she sells them in the market. I mean, it is an amazing story. Also, I mean, Helena was 10 years old at the end of the war, 10. She went to the market at night or early in the morning because no one cared about a little kid. And so they didn't watch what she was buying. When she was buying stuff and people said, why do you need so much food for just the two of you? She made up a business. She said, well, I resell it. And my mother is in Salzburg and she needs the money. And so I'm reselling the food that I can send her money. I mean, it's beyond belief that this young 10-year-old kept all these secrets, even though she played with other children. She never talked to them about what was going on ever. She kept all the secrets. Unlike Dr. Hirsch, she was able to do that. She was a remarkable, remarkable child. Remarkable child. She had enormous problems and was able to go through her childhood. Actually, she ended up better off than Stefania. So Stefania had PTSD a good part of her life. She had nightmares. She had trouble sleeping. She had fits of crying, fits of anger that she could not control. She went to doctors, psychologists, her whole life, attempting to improve her mental state. She ended up with dementia. And I think those were some of her happiest years because she sang and she danced old Polish songs and she forgot what she had lived through. It took a great toll on her, what she lived through. She was, both of them, remarkable human beings. And it is an honor to live in the world with such wonderful people. And I was delighted to have the opportunity to review this book. So thank you very much, everyone. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Shelly, for that marvelous book review. It was just wonderful. when I think of everything that happened and how it all turned out and how that what those people went through was unbelievable, so amazing.
Yeah, unbelievable, right? Diane, when they were in the attic, okay, good enough for 2 people to sit. 13 people had to lie on the ground, and when anyone turned over, they all had to turn over. And one person had to stay awake because they had to make sure that no one was snoring or
Right.
talking in their sleep or crying or making a sound. Because, in the early evening, the nurses and their Nazi boyfriends had the music going. And, but late at night, it was quiet. And so, you could just say there are rats around just so many times. And so they had to be extremely quiet. And they had to do that for 2 years. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. That's why I'm saying if it weren't true, it couldn't be true.
Right.
If it weren't true.
Shelley, I don't know if you answered this question, but is that house on Tatarska Street still around?
Yes, it's been made into, I showed you that last picture, Ellen. It's been made into a museum
Okay.
in her memory. And that big plaque I showed you with people reaching up to read it, the plaque has her name and Helena's name on it. It's the slide before this one. It's the
Right.
previous slide. There it is. Do you see it, Ellen?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the previous slide. It's been made into a museum. And
Thank you.
that's only recent. Yeah.
Did you say there's a movie? Did you say there's a movie about this?
Yes, there is a movie, Hidden in Silence. It can be found on Netflix.
Oh, thank you.
So there is a movie. It's a good movie. It's a good movie. It is. It's fine. And that is a fictional movie. But there is a documentary is also based on their lives. They are greatly
What's the name
honored.
of that? What's the name of that?
I don't
documentary?
remember the name of the document. I saw it, but I'm sorry. I don't remember
Okay,
the
we
name
can
of the
look it up.
documentary, but there
Thank
is
you. It
one.
was great.
I would Google documentary, Stefania and Helena Pogorsky-Brzezinski. So, yeah, I think it's remarkable that Poland is now accepting Jewish refugees and giving them succor and support. It is remarkable. That same town where this happened, where 22,000 Jews died, killed, shot, hung, sent to concentration camps, all of that. That same town is now providing help for Ukrainian Jews. It really is remarkable, just remarkable. So I think we're finished unless anybody has anything else they want to talk about. There are other stories. We can go on and on with stories. But I think it says what I needed to say.
It was just fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you
anyway.
for all the work that you put into it. It was just unbelievable.
But I got so caught up in their lives, Diane. I got so caught up in it. I just enjoyed it so much. They were remarkable people. And then I thought, what would I do at 15? And I think that's the question I've left us with, which we haven't answered. What would I have done at 15? I wasn't mature enough at 15. I know I wasn't. I know myself. I wasn't mature enough at 15 to make this life or death decision. And certainly I wasn't mature enough at 10 and 7 to do it. So was it just a different world?
Yes.
Was
Yeah.
it just a different world? You had to mature young, you married young, you had your children young. I think it was just a different world.
And survival was the big thing.
Right, and survival was everything. And so I just think that it was, I would not, I don't know about anyone else watching, but I would not have been able to make that choice. I know it myself. It would have been too difficult.
I think you would have.
David Tanner
I know
tells us.
I know you. You would have. You're strong enough.
But So I now have as my wallpaper, Helena and Stefania. They're peeking over my shoulder.
They would be honored.
Yeah, was honored. Anyway, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, Diane. It was a pleasure to review this book. I enjoyed it very, very much and learned so much. I did. I learned so much about what is possible, what human beings can do. It's amazing,
Yeah.
miraculous. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was just
Thank you.
great.
Take care. Bye.
Well,